Yeah, hello, good evening, and welcome to yet another session today. Please hear me. Uh, Charlie, please, can you hear me? Can I be heard?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, good evening, everyone. And for those of us who are already on the call, please let's do well to notify our colleagues that class has started and that we should be in class by now. Please, class reps, party chair men, and those of us on the call, let's prompt our colleagues to do well to join. So, and I also believe that those of us who are already on the call indicated our names and party already. Yeah, hello again, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's class. Today's conversation, as we all have it on the screen here, is challenges of young people in politics, and that will be taken by one of our amazing resource person, a very distinguished personality at that. That's Mrs. Risola Abiola, the SSA to the President on Citizenship and Leadership. Before we go on, I'd like to enjoin everyone to please notify your colleagues to join. And don't forget our usual tradition. Once you join, you indicate your name, you write your name and your party as a form of attendance, right? And I'm super happy to see that our resource person are joined already, and so we do not have to waste enough time going forward. So again, please notify your colleagues to join the call. Right, at this junction, please permit me to read the citation of our resource person for today. Our topic is the challenges of young people in politics. Getting the citation of our resource person. Risola Abiola is a young politician, communication specialist, and government relations professional. She is an advocate for gender equity and youth inclusion in governance, who works at the intersection of politics and civil society to promote enhanced representation for marginalized groups in decision-making structures. Ms. Abiola was special assistant on media to the former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Yakubu Dogara. She also served on the board of trustee of the governing All Progressive Congress from 2014 to 2018. In 2022, she contested for the position of the National Youth Leader at the APC's National Convention, the first woman since the formation of the party to do so. Rinsola is a UN Women Intergenerational Mentee, that is one of the 25 young Nigerian women chosen to carry on advocacy regarding meeting goals outlined in the Beijing Platform for Action. She also once served on the advisory board of the World Youth Movement for Democracy. She runs the Derinsola Abiola Foundation, a non-profit domiciled in Abeokuta, her hometown, and established with the aim of carrying out social development programs. She is currently the Senior Special Assistant to the President on citizenship and leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my utmost pleasure to welcome our facilitator for today, Ms. Risola Abiola, who is going to be taking us through a quite important topic, challenges of young people in politics. As individuals going through this politeracy session, there are those who probably are developing interest in politics or those who are already in the journey into politics. And so it's now important for us to learn from those who have gone ahead to see what are the challenges they face and how have they been able to overcome them. And after that, we have a bit of interaction with our resource person. So at this junction, I would just have to hand over to our resource person. Ma'am, please, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Ma. Thank you. It's always a pleasure having you on board. And I think you have the floor now. You can go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please help project the presentation so I can start. Good evening, everyone. So it's
Yeah, the
a
projection
short
is on.
presentation. Yes, it's a short presentation just briefly highlighting some of the challenges faced by young people in politics and also putting forward a few solutions. So after the presentation, I believe there'll be a question and answer session as well. So I'll just try to go through the presentation as quickly as possible. So essentially, politics is about who gets what, when, and how. It entails actions and activities concerned with achieving and using power in a country or society. It's an organized process of coming to a peaceful resolution regarding how resources are harnessed and deployed, as well as how society itself is structured, run, and maintained. So, it's a youth program, so just going to talk about the concepts of representation and youth inclusion. So representation and inclusion are important. Sorry, I'm trying to zoom in a bit. Okay. And to preserve the legitimacy of the political process, it's important that the goal of satisfactorily addressing social concerns in a peaceful and organized way, constituent groups should be adequately represented and afforded equal opportunities to aspire to positions of authority and advocate for issues important to them. Essentially, we say, the basic definition of democracy that we were taught in primary school, government of the people, by the people, for the people. And it captures the essence of representation in a democracy because all the different constituent groups are to be adequately represented in a democratic system. And now on youth inclusion specifically, young people account for a big proportion of Nigeria's population. But despite this, the level of representation, if we look at it as a whole, things are improving. This presentation was made a while back. I keep saying every time that I need to update this presentation, but I really do need to update it. But then, since this was put together, we've had improved levels of representation, especially at the federal level and in some states like Kwara, like Lagos. But that's still not the situation everywhere. So in quite a number of states, we'll still have a very rather low level of representation for young people. So in 2018, the Not Too Young to Run bill was enacted, lowering the age of eligibility for elected positions to 25 years. And while some have been able to benefit from the new law, there's still much work to be done. So pathways to power, again, I left out a third part. So there's the running for office, there's appointments, after government has been formed. And then there's also seeking power from within the political party system. And I think that's also very important as well for us to consider and be mindful of as young people. Next slide, please. So what are the challenges faced by young Nigerians in politics? There's the issue of strategy, there's the issue of funding, there's the issue of party systems and processes. There's a challenge of lack of enabling policies. There's a challenge of cultural bias. Some of us may have experienced ageism in different ways, within our different social contexts. It's more pronounced in some places than others. And it's the same way how women specifically can also be impacted by cultural bias in terms of those who believe that women should not aspire to leadership positions, especially, in the political space and even sometimes in the professional world as well. So there's a challenge of violence. We've seen a great reduction in violence in politics. I'm assuming there'll be people who are, there'll be people in their 20s, well over 30s, maybe 40s, part of this cohort. But if you remember, for those of us who may recall the early days of our transition to democracy, elections used to be quite violent in essentially all parts of the country. But we've seen a marked reduction in that, although it is still a challenge in some parts and on some occasions. Then there's lack of access and mentorship. And then there's excessive monetization. Please hold this slide. I want to explain a few things. So regarding the issue of strategy, it's for instance, a lot of young people. I actually just came in from an engagement not too long ago where the engagement is about young people, and I got questions about, oh, you guys keep saying young people are the leaders of tomorrow. How do we balance that with all this rhetoric about joining politics? And essentially, representation is not going to fall into our laps. Power isn't just going to be handed to us. We need to organize, we need to lobby, we need to put ourselves out there, we need to do a lot of self-development essentially for the political field for those of us who choose to join. So when we talk about strategy, we also need to learn to work together as young people. So that's lots of people who want to join politics or who are in politics but aren't really applying the correct strategy for political engagement and to be able to grow within political spaces essentially. And then I think the one on party systems and processes talks to or speaks to the issue of internal democracy and how that is a persistent challenge with democratic systems, although there are ways around that as well. And I will touch on that in the next slide, God willing. And then enabling policies. You'll find a lot of political parties sometimes they might say there's a waiver for women or a waiver for young people below a certain age if they want to run for office, but there is really nothing mandating the inclusion of young people, of women on in tickets or, even appointed positions, in many cases, except in states where they have an affirmative action bill. So, that policy is not really there. And the level of inclusion essentially has to depend on the goodwill or the benevolence of whoever is in power. So that's one challenge as well. Like for instance, at the federal level, we're seeing lots of young people hold key positions in government. In subsequent administrations, if the precedent is not as youth friendly, we might actually see a lot of progress, in that regard being lost. So that's speaking to the lack of enabling policies. Now imagine a state like Kwara where young people are very involved and very well represented, and then another governor comes in who doesn't really believe in young people, holding authority. that governor certainly will not appoint as many young people. So that's where the issue of policy comes in. Cultural bias, I already spoke about that. Violence, the violent nature of politics is in some areas could actually deter people from joining, even if they want to. The lack of access and mentorship, young people require guidance and they often don't know who to approach or how to approach people. And some actually do want mentors, but are unable to gain the access that they need to people who can mentor them. And then excessive monetization is also linked to the issue of funding. So next slide, please. So how can the identified challenges be surmounted? So knowledge, capacity building, and strategic thinking. There's also the strategic engagement. So as a person, as a young person going into the political space, build your CV, build your skill set, build your professional qualifications, and then try to work with other young people so that you can jointly advocate for enhanced inclusion for your own generation within those political spaces. Also work to be active and to be visible during key moments like campaigns and other such things, and then try to use your skills, whatever skills you have, try to also use them to, for the benefit of your party or for the benefit of your chosen candidate. Those kinds of things, they help as well. You have to be active within the political system. And it's, of course, tied to the issue of networking. Build your network, um, make good contacts, and a good network, social capital is very key. Like in future, when, for instance, you might decide to run for office or you might decide to aim for something, having a good network actually helps to minimize the challenge of not being able to, perhaps fund things directly, or even just with getting your name or getting your CV to people who matter. Essentially, you can't possibly know everybody, but if you have people who are willing to speak up for you in spaces because they're aware of the good work that you're doing, it helps a great deal with career growth, whether it's in politics or the private sector, or really any sector of your choosing. So crowdfunding is it's a possible solution to the issue of the high cost of political participation, especially politics doesn't really get expensive until perhaps you want to run for office, which is when it gets really expensive. But then at the point where you're running for office, you should have built enough social capital to speak. Um, you should have built enough social capital to be able to, mobilize resources from within your network. And then crowdfunding, for the crowdfunding example, I would make an example of General former President Muhammadu Buhari, who, up until the campaign began, everybody called GMB. And the his popularity amongst the masses, contributed widely to how much people were willing to do and how far people were willing to go for him. And that campaign, I was part of it as well, and I witnessed Nigerians basically from every walk of life donating to his campaign, supporting his campaign because they believed in him as a person. So it also helps if you are able to attain that kind of level where you have the common person believe in you and actively support you. If you decide to make a presidential run in future, or maybe run to govern your state or represent your constituency, if you've worked to the point, shown enough people believe in you to the point where like the regular person is willing to support you, that's actually a really huge deal in politics. And that's where the issue of crowdfunding comes in. And then ideally, it's not expected that anybody should actually fund their own campaign like 100%. In advanced democracies, you will find that candidates often get donations from different organizations. In the US, they talk a lot about campaign donations. A very recent example, the Harris-Biden campaign, how much was raised the moment it was announced that Kamala Harris would be running for president. So, those kinds of systems actually expect or campaigns in those climes actually rely on donations from the public or from corporations, although there's a whole lot of rules and laws governing that as well. Then partnerships, consultations, and advocacy, linked to the previous recommendations of strategic thinking and networking. I mentioned earlier that it helps when young people within political systems are able to form like pressure groups and then advocate together and also show capacity by making maybe like policy recommendations and all of that. So it helps with projecting your members, projecting the young people within whatever party you've chosen as competent, and essentially it helps to build each other's profiles. And it also helps you with being able to occupy leadership positions, within those particular fora. It helps to develop your leadership skills and prepare you for much bigger responsibilities in future. Then lobbying is key for instance, you work during a campaign, your candidate wins, and then you start to engage, strategically engage the stakeholders with a view to getting a seat at the table because you want to serve in public. So it's a skill that we need to develop as young people. Many of us don't like doing it, but it's a skill that you essentially just have to develop as a young person. And then lobbying isn't even just for getting into office, it's also for getting your ideas to be adopted. I remember there was a time I had a position paper on youth inclusion, and I submitted that to the chairman of my party at the time, Chief Oyegun, and there were other members of the party leadership present. So lobbying isn't just for yourself per se, or isn't specifically limited to getting positions in government. It's also very key for influencing decisions within, whether it's a political party system or within government or just within like a group of leaders. If you're trying to get them to say, for instance, have more young people in the party's campaign committee, so you would have to start engaging the different stakeholders who can influence that particular outcome and who can, influence that process. So lobbying essentially is about influencing or engaging stakeholders with a view to getting a certain result, a desired result. So it could be on anything really. Law enforcement as well will help us tackle the challenge of violence, proper law enforcement in a way that people know that there are consequences for actions, because essentially people tend to do whatever they believe they can get away with. So proper law enforcement, especially around campaign and periods of high political activity, would actually help to allay people's fears regarding the issue of violence in politics. Then mentorship is very important for developing the talents of young people within the political space. I've benefited from mentorship. I've had really great mentors, and I'm very thankful for everything I've learned from all of them. Although there are things that you certainly would still have to learn on your own, because there's only so much that you can absorb from the experiences of others. There are things that, although you've learned so much from others, when you experience them, it's really going to help with also shaping your own perspectives and developing your worldview, especially within politics. And then when it comes to mentorship, one thing I would also like for us to keep in mind is that your mentor doesn't necessarily have to be an older politician. You could also be mentored by somebody who is closer to you in age. And that's also very effective, especially because your experiences will be similar. So you'll be able to relate to each other much better. And relationships with people who are around our age group are usually a lot less formal than the kind of relationships that we have with older folks as well. So mentorship is key. And if you're in a position to mentor other young people, please do that. Peer mentorship is actually very effective. And essentially, if you're also looking out for mentors, the older ones are usually quite hard to reach. It might actually be easier to access somebody who is like closer to you in age and has gained some level of experience, and they're able to impart what they've learned into you as well, as long as they are willing and you're both willing. Next slide, please. So I think this is the part where I take questions. As I promised, it's a very brief presentation. So do we have any questions or any things I would like to seek further clarity about? And I'm sorry, I'm really tired today, so sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you so very much for always. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for sharing your experiences as well. And I'm sure we have people who already have questions. We're going to take the number of people having questions one after the other. So for now, I only see a hand raised, and that is Iziani Chiamaka Priska. That's the only person raising their hand for now that I can see. Okay.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Okay,
Yeah, good
thank you,
evening.
presenter. Thank you so much for today's presentation. I love a lot of things you said, such as it's important that we come out and put ourselves out there. these positions, opportunities don't fall from the sky. We have to put ourselves out there and let our work speak for us. So thank you for that. So my question comes from there are certain challenges that we face, such as cultural or maybe communal mindset challenges, especially as a woman trying to find her space or find her position in the political sphere. So do you have any advice, any pointers you can help overcome those cultural, especially when it comes to electing positions? Because you have to let people have to believe in you for them to vote. Most times people have to believe in you for them to vote for you. How then do you overcome such challenges when you face them?
So I would say that I hinted at these cultural biases as well during the presentation, and the method that you take essentially would have to be informed by your local realities. So if it's in a place where they have issues with gender, you could do a lot of advocacy. You can also start by building like a track record of being there for the community, contributing to the community, supporting the community. And I don't necessarily mean like spending money without limits, but like just being there and being responsive, like being a go-to person, so to speak. So you've already proven your capacity. And then it also helps to know who the leaders within those communities are. So if it's like a religious issue, it helps to work with or engage religious stakeholders and then tell them this is what you have in mind. You will identify the ones who are open to what you have discussed, and then they might actually now be the ones to find a way to enlighten others on the fact that this thing that you're asking for and this thing you're aiming to do does not actually contravene religious principles, because it depends on the major influencers, so to speak, within the communities. So that's how you know who to talk to and whose voice needs to be heard and who needs to do the job of convincing others. And then there's the issue of cultural norms as well. It also affects some of us, generally young people. There's a way they look at you as less competent than older people, or they think you'll be given to youthful exuberance. So we also must take like if there are certain things like generalizations that are made about the groups that we belong to, we should also be mindful enough to not do things that confirm those biases or do things that will make them say, oh, but we already said this is how these people are. So we should also be mindful of those cultural things and the things that they say and ensure that we're not playing into their hands or exhibiting the kind of character that they accuse us of, which be for their own reasons, or which are the reasons that they say that they will not support young people or women in that in instance. And then one thing I've also learned for very key women who have done quite well in politics. I've just realized that some of them tend to be from, would I say, liberal constituencies, and that's looking at the National Assembly now. But then others, it's not really about things being liberal so much as just what politics requires where they're from. So take the examples we've had. There was a time when we had two women senators from one state in the southeast. I think that was Anambra. And of the three senators, two were women. And you just know that whatever it takes to, run successfully in that state was something that they had and that they could exceed. So it was, as if it is money that is like the major ingredient, so to speak, for securing a seat in that place, these were women who had the capacity. So essentially, again, the local issues will determine what you need as a woman to be able to break through that glass ceiling in your own community. So if it is if you need the buying of elders, develop a strategy that addresses whatever their concerns might be and then get them on board for what you're trying to do. And it also helps again because there's more than one pathway to power. So what I've also found that women are able to do sometimes is they begin by securing appointive positions. So they might start with an appointment, and then from there, they do their stakeholder engagement and strategic engagement, and then they're able to get within the party. So again, it depends on your local context. And it depends on, how people tend to emerge where you're from. So when you're able to study all these things and you're able to identify the pattern, because there is always a pattern, that will then enable you to know what strategy that you will design and follow as a woman or as a young person in that particular community.
All right, thank you so much. So the next person to ask question is Omar Aminu. Omar, I'll ask you to unmute now, Omar.
Okay, hello. Good evening, each and everyone. I don't know
Good
if you
evening.
can hear me, please.
Loud and clear, you
Can
can be
you
heard.
hear me, please?
Yes, you
Yes.
can be heard.
Hello. Okay, so thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. And what I just want to say or ask here is regarding the cost of governance. It is no longer the issue of too young throne. Rather, it is the issue of too poor throne. Yes, too far run. For somebody like me who wants to join politics and I wish to start from the grassroots, like contesting for councillorship office. But to set an example, right now in Kano State, the Kano State Independent Electoral Commission sold out the councillorship form at the cost of 5 million. Compare with somebody like me who don't have even 1 million, but they are selling the form of councillorship at the cost of 5 million cash. So, as a youth or as the democratic advocates, how can we come together to ensure that we raise our voice or create an advocacy to reduce the cost of governance in Nigeria? And Mr. Presenter, you made mention of mentors. You need mentor to build your capacity and understand the reality happenings in Nigeria's politics. So please, can you be my mentor? Because I have, zeal and interest to really join politics in the near future. So can you be my mentor? This is just my request for you, and thank you very much.
So, as
All right,
firstly, on
thank
the
you.
cost of running. Okay, so on the cost of running, I did mention as well that funding is a major issue for young people. However, I'm a bit concerned. Is it not political parties that sell forms? Does the State Electoral Commission also sell forms to people who want to run for office? I thought it was the political parties that sell forms. And if it's political parties, I see no reason why councillorship forms should be that expensive at all, considering the ones that are really pricey are the ones for House of Reps, Senate, like the higher offices. So please confirm to be sure, because at that level it shouldn't be that expensive at all. Then essentially you also provided the answer in the question that you asked, because there's been a lot of advocacy as well around the cost of these items and how they're excluding young people. So running for councillor should actually not be wild like when it comes to expenses. So I'm actually pretty surprised to hear that that's the experience in Kano. That's actually quite odd. Um so sometimes if things are done deliberately like that, I would firstly urge you to confirm that that's the cost of it. And then if it truly is it the party that's charging or the State Electoral Commission? And whatever the case is, it might actually be worthwhile to have a campaign around that because it's clearly an exclusionary tactic if it is true. And that's really not democratic at all and shouldn't be allowed to stand. Then on the issue of mentorship, I'll be honest with you, I have a lot of mentees already, and I honestly cannot guarantee that I would, have the time. And I believe there's a distance barrier as well. However, I'm on social media. You can find me anytime. If you have a question or there's something you would want to run by me, then inshallah I will. If it's whenever I have the time, I will respond. I just can't guarantee like a seamless like mentor-mentee relationship is all.
All right, thank you so much, ma'am. So I think the next thing is Glorious, I'll ask you to unmute now. Hello, Gloria. Kindly unmute your mic so you can have the floor to speak.
Good evening. Thank you so much for your
Good evening.
presentation.
Good evening, you can be heard.
My question is about mentorship. I know you referred to the fact that mentorship, getting access to the right mentors, is also a challenge. And you also shared how getting access to mentors, you said you have a lot of mentors, and how their impact has made a lot on your career to date. So I want you to share insight into how somebody who just wants to get better, who has a lot to achieve in the self-development area, can get access to the right people. especially when the person has no no groups or anybody in the career the person wants to get into.
So mentorship is very important, but I wouldn't say it is entirely compulsory. So if you do a lot of reading and you apply yourself, eventually, funny enough, eventually, especially when you're within the space, it's like when you want something, right? There's a joke I'm going to make reference to where somebody said, I'm not saying you have to marry for money, but if you want to fall in love with someone wealthy, go to where wealthy people are and fall in love, something like that. And it's an analogy regarding how you don't necessarily have to look for mentors, but if you're like within the political space, you're doing your best, you're applying yourself, you're reading, you're learning, you're growing, you will eventually, come across people who one way or the other will become your mentor, will mentor you. So these things sometimes happen naturally. I think I've only ever approached one person like directly before and say, "Oh, I would like for you to mentor me." But usually what I find is that maybe like I meet someone and they're like, "Oh, I know you, I'm aware of you," and then that relationship is formed at that moment. Or there are other cases in which I've worked with a person and then one way or another they became like a mentor. So it's not necessarily formal black and white come and mentor me kind of thing. But if you're within the space and you do the work within the space, you will meet people that you will forge these relationships with and that you will learn a lot from. So again, it helps to read very widely. And another thing you can do is if you identify people that you admire or whose stories speak to you, they don't even have to be Nigerian. I've done a lot of reading on women politicians from across the world. There's this book I have, Women in Politics. It looks at women who have served in different capacities, like heads of key global organizations. And I learned a lot of lessons from just reading their stories. So you could also do that as well. You could seek out people that you're interested in, and also keep in mind that nobody's perfect, right? So the fact that you're interested in a person or you admire a person doesn't mean that they necessarily have to be perfect or that you have to know entirely everything about them. But you can also learn from even the ones that you're not very that you don't like very much, like, but still learn about them and read their stories because you will still learn very valuable lessons. So it helps to also do research and read very many lessons from people who have also walked that path that you're aspiring to before you.
All right, thank you so much, ma'am. So I'll ask Ibrahim Jared to unmute. Ibrahim, I've asked you to unmute, so you will ask a question. Can you hear? If kindly unmute your mic, I've asked you to unmute.
Yeah, well, hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, madam. By your name, and I understand that you are either a sibling or a daughter or a close relation of late Alhaji Dr. MKO Abiola. They have been in the forefront of Nigerian politics, so we'll never forget them because of their contribution towards the development of Nigerian politics. What I want you to digest more on your paper is that if you say your paper title, the challenges of young people in politics. Okay, like myself now, I'm over 60 years, but I'm still young. Because if you compare me with some of our politicians today, like our current president, our former president, General Bahari, and the current president, Alhaji Bola Ahmed Tinubu, they are far, far, far ahead of me in terms of age. So I want you to digest more on your paper. What do you what exactly you mean? Do you mean by young people? I want you to attach age to that you are young people you call, because if you say young, it can be from people from 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, and even 60 years, like myself. So I want you to please throw more light on this your paper. Thank you very much.
All right, sir. So essentially the young there, although generally when we're talking about young people, especially in policy design and political matters generally. Ideally, it's referring to people below 35, but in practical terms, we're looking at people below 40 and below. However, the context of it, young in this context can
I
also
see.
refer to
So you mean
people.
for over years now?
Sir, I'm not done. No. I was going to say that young in this context can also refer to people who are new to politics or people who are just joining the political system. So those are things that they should be looking out for. If, for instance, somebody has been following politics or following political developments for many years, but they're not actually part of a party and now they're just joining. So some of what we've shared might be useful to such a person because they are new to the political system. But then issues like cultural bias against young people will not apply to them because they are much older, and it's unlikely that other people will look at them and say, oh, because you're young, we don't think you're qualified. So they won't be able to relate to some of those challenges, but it is still material that is useful for anybody who is new to politics or the political party system generally.
Okay. Okay. So
Yes.
you mean age? There is no need to consider age. As much as long as as your paper is concerned,
Well,
there's no issue of age.
there are parts of it, as I said, like issues of cultural bias that would be more relatable to people who are young, but somebody who is older but is new to politics will find a lot of what is in the document useful as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you will give us more. I mean, more papers or books so that we can contact. We go through and read more about this your presentation, please.
All right, so I'll do my best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The next person here is he's so he's out now. Kindly do that and put up your question.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Madam.
Sorry, did I get the name correctly first?
Yeah, Ehis. Can you hear me?
All right, thank you.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation and the good way you've been answering those questions. So, quick one. You mentioned about having a strategy that is peculiar to our area, how they normally get into politics or leadership positions, then you have a strategy and follow that. So my question then is, what if my area, it's all about, they want to see what you've done, maybe physically. So when you come up, like you want to run for an office, they like asking you, what have you done? So what strategy would be to gaining a position that way? And apart from that, they also gauge your presentation skills, not just maybe how to present the topic, but how to, be very articulate and talk to people and move a crowd. So those two things are what they look for in a candidate. How do you now build a strategy around that as a young Nigerian looking for a political position or leadership position? Thank you.
So I would say something, right? Different things work for different people. So in as much as I want to say sometimes you need to take some time to build capacity, I also know other young people who have gone in run, and the very first time they tried to run, they got the ticket and they won. So as I said, different things happen for different people. And then there are also areas, generally they would advise you if you want to run for office, do it on the platform of one of the major parties. But I also know young people who have run on smaller parties, and won. So again, it depends on your capacity and then the situation at that time. So if you're from a place where they like to say things like, what have you done? That means they place a premium on community development and community engagement. Now, do you have the capacity to also invest in community development? If you have the capacity for that, you could have like a foundation, an NGO where, you focus on varying things that are like the needs of the people. If there's a water challenge, maybe sink a borehole somewhere, give scholarships, do whatever is within your might or within your power. And if you don't have the finances to do things like that, you can become an advocate for your community. So if all you do is actually draw attention of maybe whoever is in government to what they're not doing right or what needs to be done, that is also a very important role in a community. Somebody who advocates for them, who speaks for them is also very key. And then on the issue of being able to engage, politics requires a lot of human engagement. Politics is people management. Politics is someone like me, for instance, I'm very introverted, but I'm very thankful that I'm in politics because I've learned to be social, even if it's not part of my nature, but I've learned to talk to people, I've learned to be patient with people, I've learned to listen to people. Like these are the kind of qualities that you actually need to be able to excel in politics. Because ultimately, people need to like you as a person. And at the end of the day, it's God that makes it easy because you'll still find a lot of people within the political space who still don't have like much of a personality and all of that. So, like, you have to learn essentially to be a people person and to manage people because it's a key part of politics, or you're always going to run into issues. So sometimes being likable also helps, and being likable within the local context, especially if you're looking at participating in politics locally, it means being aware of your social and cultural norms and communicating in a way that will not offend your people or that will make them think that you haven't respected them enough. Depending on where you're from, those are all the kinds of things that you have to be mindful of. Then another thing I would want to say, although a lot of young people don't like to hear it, and at a point I didn't like hearing it either, is that the moment you enter politics is not necessarily when you have to run for office. As I said, some people did it and it worked for them, but if you look at those people well, you will find out that it may have been the first time they ran, but it was not their first time being known in that community. So, like, over a period of time, like they've been popular for a while, they know them, they take care of young people, they're always around, maybe like they fix things in the community, they support people. So them running for office is like a culmination of all those efforts that they've been making, which I think is the situation in your own constituency from what you've said, because they like to ask, what have you done? So it helps sometimes to bide your time and to take your time. And then if you're going to join politics as well, don't necessarily have it at the back of your mind that running is the only way that you can make a difference. So one thing that also happens within political systems is that you may run for office and not get it, but it doesn't mean that you won't get something else. So as an example, right, I ran for a national youth leader in my party. I didn't get it. Part of the reasons was because I'm female and they weren't really sure at that time how the idea of a female national youth leader would be received. And then ultimately, because I'm a faith-based person, I just believe it wasn't meant for me. So whatever reason that came from our leaders was just, as part of the fact that it was not meant for me. If it was meant for me, me being female would have been the reason, I would have been part of the reason why it was given to me. So sometimes we aim for things and what we aim for is not what we get. And now I'm serving government in this capacity as SSA to the president. And he allows me to then also now see how I can merge, the instrumentality of government and the power of government with youth issues that I am passionate about and to then act on those issues. So you also have to have it at the back of your mind that if you aim for elective office or you aim for political office, it could even be lobby, for instance. You could decide you want to lobby to head an agency or lobby to be, and in a particular position in your state, and then you don't get that, but you get something else. One thing that I just believe is that with the political system, as long as you show up and you participate and you're active, even if what you want is not what you get, eventually, by God's grace, something will come. So I would want to urge you, because in those constituencies where they usually ask what have you done, it also points to the fact that you need to have you need to have had like a certain level of resources, because nobody does community work with an empty pocket. Like, I know what it means to run a foundation. I run one back home, and I know how much resources it could consume from time to time. So these are things that might be out of the reach of a lot of young people, and they're not able to do these things not because they don't want to, but because they just don't have the means to. So what I would also advise you to do as a young person is you can register a foundation or a non-profit organization in your hometown, and then put little resources together to do what you can. If what you can as a start is buy paint and paint maybe some primary or government secondary school that looks, doesn't look so good anymore. Whatever you can muster with your resources, get that done. Try to build a portfolio for that non-profit. And then subsequently work at getting support from, it could be, local NGOs or even international NGOs. Try to get support for them for the work that you do. We have a lot of development partners, for instance, in Nigeria that do a lot of work, different focus areas. Some are about healthcare, some are about gender issues, some are about youth development. So try to also do your research on all these organizations and seeing what kind of causes they support, and then you can now pitch to them based on that, portfolio you've been able to build up by your community interventions, and then bring them into your community to do good work there. So running a nonprofit is not necessarily about using just your resources alone. You also have to be resourceful. And it could also even help you as a young person. Because when they say the kind of people you're bringing, imagine doing something with Bill, the Gates Foundation. They will say, "Ha, he brought Bill Gates to this community." You know how like people, react to things like that. So it would even help to also boost your own street cred, as we like to say, within that community. So think outside of the box and don't be discouraged by that. So if that's what they do, just try to aim for it. You don't have to have so much to start, but at least try to register that nonprofit, get people together, intervene, have direct community interventions in key issues. Try to see how you can also forge partnerships, look for information. There's usually very often you get a call for proposals from all these agencies. So do your research as well and see. You can look at the kind of causes that you want to do something about in your community, and then do your research on the kind of agencies that are willing to fund those kinds of interventions, and then be on the lookout for calls for proposals and see what you can do. You never know. Just be, and then of course be very prayerful. Um, all of this talk about strategy and everything, for me, right? I believe if God has ordained something for you, He will facilitate it, and that God inspires us to do things. So above all, before anything, just entrust all your plans to God and ask for God's guidance, because ultimately it's God that decides our fate. That's what my religion teaches. So all of these are human efforts. If you want something, you also have to put in some effort and work towards it. But don't be discouraged if you're not able to do as much as the people who are currently in office have done in that community. Look at how you can also mobilize resources, for that community, and bring in very key people that would actually even impress, your people and really wow them, and, make them appreciate you as a person and how much you're willing to do, and the lengths that you're willing to go to get, the people, other organizations to, directly intervene in the issues that matter to them.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think I'll just the chat box. We have one question. This Oluwashim Oluboyer asked a question. He said, with respect to appointing positions, are there any guidelines for qualifying for consideration?
So I would say it varies from place to place, but as a young person, please do everything you can to be qualified. It's one thing, it's very important that you participate in your party processes, but also work on building yourself as a young person, as a young man or as a young woman. It's very important that if someone calls for your CV, you do have a CV to share, that you can respond, and that CV is good. I've seen CVs that people will text on WhatsApp, and then another thing we need to learn as young people is how to properly, would I say, package ourselves. Like sometimes I've seen somebody send me, he said his wife needed a job, and then he sent me a CV, and it was a picture of a printed document. Nobody's going to do anything with that. So we need to learn how to communicate, how to properly present ourselves, not just like physically in person, but on paper. Like what is it about you that you believe would make somebody go, I think this person should definitely work with me. So invest in self-development. If you look around, again, it depends, because there are leaders like mine, the kind of leaders that I have had, like take the president, for example. He's not going to appoint somebody who doesn't have a resume to speak of, essentially. Look at the governor of the CBN. Look at you'll find a lot of this FIRS, the chairman FIRS. Like you'll find people who are politicians, like people who are active politicians, seasoned politicians, but whose CVs can also not be tossed aside because they have very strong qualifications professionally. So we have to learn as young people to balance the two. Don't focus so much on politics that you refuse to go back to school. If you finished with a grade that maybe wasn't so good, study further. You can make up for that. It's not the end of the world. If someone was telling me that there are people that when you tell them, send me your CV, they'll be like, oh, okay, okay, okay. And then you never hear from them because they actually don't have one to speak of. Like either they didn't go to school to a certain level or they just didn't take it seriously. So as a young person, you don't want to be that person. You want to be able to work, to contribute to the political process. And then when it's time to actually serve and you're called upon, you don't want to run away because you don't have a CV or because you haven't built any experience. And one challenge that I had, this as well, I think I should include in the presentation. I chose politics very early. I went into politics essentially immediately after NYSC. So I chose politics really, really early. And one thing I found was that nobody wanted to hire a politician. Like, and then because I wasn't even doing it quietly, I was the PRO of the APC youth wing at the time. So I was constantly on TV doing media engagements. And then when I realized I was going to have a serious challenge with, formal employment, I started my own firm. So I went and I enrolled for NIPR, the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, because I realized I had an affinity for media and I wanted to learn it professionally. I studied statistics. So I went and I enrolled for that and I got the certification and I opened my media firm because I sent my CV out to so many people and then I had a few, gigs, but like nothing really serious because essentially I even talked to a friend who at the time owned a startup and he said, Risala, we love you, but my partners, nobody wants to hire a politician. And I understood it and I didn't hold it against them. So I went and I started something for myself. And then I got appointed based on my efforts with the, party campaign, as God would have it, at the end of the day, these things are ordained for us. It is what Allah wills that happens. So I got appointed to the National Assembly as an essay to the speaker in a media role. After that, and then I now got a job with a multinational media company, Oprah Group at the time. We all know OP, so there was All Right for a while, and they needed somebody with a background in politics or just somebody with very important, like essentially with political knowledge and knowledge of how government works to handle government relations for them in northern Nigeria. And they reached out to me. I didn't even apply. I was headhunted for the role. And then they called me and they were like, "Oh, we want you to have this role." And I said, "Okay, this is what you will pay me." And they said, "Fine." And I was like, "Why did I ask for more?" So what I'm trying to say is that if you choose politics early, like I did, I chose politics in my early 20s, it's going to limit your opportunities in some ways, but at the same time, it will open other opportunities to you. And then it was after that first appointment at National Assembly, I got the job with ORIDE, handling government relations for all of Northern Nigeria. And then again, later on, I got another job at a non-profit organization, Director of Media and Public Affairs. Just identify what you want to do, have absolute faith in God and go for it. So it's not it's not a sweet story all the time. There are challenges that I had to face personally as well for choosing politics and for choosing it so early. So these are all things that you have to prepare yourself for. And then don't look at if you've made a choice, stick to that decision and do whatever you need to do to adapt to it. May God be with us all, essentially. Just pray really hard, know what you want, go for what you want, and don't hold back. So essentially, that's what I had to do. And alhamdulillah, it's been a great journey, but I'm the one who knows the kind of challenges that I really, really had to deal with just because I chose politics and at such a young age too.
Thank you so very much, ma'am. So for me, I also have a question, and I think the question would also benefit a lot of other participants here. For the most part, I've seen a lot of young people who are interested in politics, but I see that the only thing they have is passion. They have no concrete skill sets that can give them a headway in that in politics even. So I'd like you to share with us, being someone who, interestingly, you shared your story, and it quite was quite intriguing. Can you share some of the, say, technical skill set, soft skill set, human skill set that at least one should build themselves upon upon certain level before they say, or even when they are already in politics as young people or young persons, what are the skill sets that one should try to arm themselves with before opportunity comes? So, like I used to say, before tomorrow comes, right?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, right, my first degree was in statistics, and then I was interested in media. I went and got the certification for that. And then now I'm actually currently studying economics because I grew interested in statistics and economics again. So now I'm back in school studying economics for my master's. And essentially, as a young person in the political field, you have to arm yourself with knowledge, and it's important that you know what you're talking about. So you don't want to be seen as just oh, these people have come again, all these youth that nobody wants to hear what you have to say. So try as much as possible to develop yourself, to build your own content. Content is not just about what we produce for social media or what we put out there. It's about what we put inside ourselves as well. Learn, read, understand the political terrain that you're getting into. Because it's very important that if you have the required level of understanding, then you know what you're doing at all times. So you can be mindful of how you want to participate and how you want to be perceived. So that's one. Then two, your people skills are very important. So growing up, I'm using myself as an example again. I used to stammer, right? And there's a saying about my people about how stammerers tend to have a very short temper. And in my case, it was very true. But in politics, you have to learn to engage with different kinds of people at different times. So I've had to learn, essentially, especially since I joined politics, to be a bit calmer in how I react to things, even when I feel like maybe something is not being done right or something is not being done properly. So you have to really learn how to manage people as well. Um, I'm very introverted, but now I know how to adapt to social situations. It's still not my ideal. I still don't like going out. I still would prefer to. Usually, my life is either I'm at work or I'm at home, basically. But when it has to do with party things, campaigns, like I know when to be at places and I know how to show up when it is required of me. So, like, there are things that it requires. I'm in a youth focused role, for instance. I can't say that because I'm an introvert, I won't go to places where young people will be. I'm in government, essentially one of the people representing youth interests. Now imagine getting an invite to a key youth engagement and then I decide not to show up because I'm introverted. It doesn't make any sense. So we have to put our personal, our peculiarities aside and focus on what we need to do or who we need to be to get our jobs done. And another thing you need to also learn is how to work with other people. No man is an island, and no field really puts that particular thing in perspective like politics. You have to learn to work with other people. No matter how much you think you know or how much you think you've learned, you have to learn to listen to other people, especially if you want to participate, say, in local politics. You will meet people who maybe you will think of as, oh, this one didn't really go to school. But I promise you that they've had a lot of experience and they know exactly what they're saying, and you have to hear them out. So you have to be patient with people. You have to learn to work with people. You have to respect people. And beyond just respecting people, you have to make people feel like you respect them. So, like, and communication is very dynamic. In some places, there are people you would say a certain thing to that won't be offended. You'll say the same thing to somebody else with exactly the same intention, and they will be offended by what you just said to them. So you also have to learn the local nuances of language and how to communicate with people so that you're not leaving offended people everywhere you go. They think you're not humble enough or you're not nice enough. Because at the end of the day, right, a lot of decisions, political decisions, who we vote for, essentially is determined by who we like. So it's not really about your qualifications. There's a certain level at which the fact that you're qualified might even be a problem because people will think you're arrogant because you think you're qualified. So essentially, politics is people management, politics is human relations, politics is communication, politics is public relations, politics is making people feel heard and valued. So these are, skills that you really, really, really have to learn. And you also need to learn to communicate politely because you will get a lot of requests if you're in active politics. Being able to actually communicate politely that I'm sorry, but I can't do this now, it goes a very long way. Because people think you've spoken to them rudely because they asked you for help. That's another issue on its own. Another thing as a politician, if you choose politics, is you have to learn to give. Because ultimately, it is deeply ingrained in our culture, and it's also a requirement of sorts for politics in these climes. But be wise about it. Don't leave yourself at a disadvantage because you're trying to make people happy. But you have to learn to give, and you have to learn to have people around you, support other people, show up for other people as much as you can, as long as it's not like a burden or a problem for you specifically.
All right, thank you so I mean, it's quite an expository session. And okay, there's another question here by the same person. He said, as necessary to the citizenship and leadership, are there any special engagement with young people for the purpose of developing new leaders and hearing their views on cultural realities?
So this is a very, very beautiful question, and I would say that yes, there's something in progress, but I'm going to explain something very briefly. There are different kinds of offices in a political system or within the public service. And some offices like mine are advisory, essentially. So what that means is that we're largely meant to advise. We don't really have executive power, so we can advise on what needs to be done. And in situations where, there's like an initiative that we feel strongly about, we will then have to like mobilize resources to get that done. So I actually do have something focused on leadership for young people, but it's in the design phase. We've designed the project actually. We're now working on getting all the partners to align on it. But the reason why we can't announce that yet is because that alignment has not happened, just yet. We're not done with that yet. And I don't believe in announcing things prematurely. I'm actually only just talking about it because you asked, but I actually do have it in mind that God willing, by Allah's grace, once we're ready and we're, set to go, we'll actually encourage people who have gone through trainings like this one by Electoral College to apply, because those are actually the kinds of people that we're looking for to be part of the program. And on hearing young people's views, we're open. We take a lot of feedback through engagements. I just had one with the National Universities Debate Council as well. That's where I'm coming from this afternoon. So we're actually very open, and you'll find a lot of us, especially within the youth ministry, attending events, engaging with people. So we actually do take a lot of feedback directly, even on social media as well. And I'm sure Nigerians by now should have noticed that the administration is very open to getting feedback through social media. And one thing that I would like to say, I think no more questions. So my final comments essentially before I go off is please understand that I'm very faith driven, and I would urge everyone, as I said earlier, pray about everything, seek God's guidance. If God guides you, then there's nobody that can misguide or mislead you. So seek God's guidance and understand that ultimately it is God who determines what happens with all of us. So whatever field you've chosen, pray about it and then go out and do whatever you feel that you need to do to advance your career, while being mindful, to at least be ensured that you're doing things that you believe are right and things that are in line with the principles that you subscribe to. And as well, always remember why you joined politics. I joined politics because I figured I started with youth advocacy, but then it just seemed to me as though there was a lot of talking going on and not a lot of action. And, I felt like I could be making a difference if I actually made that transition into active politics. And if you feel that way too, please go ahead and do it. And in choosing a political party, personally, I'm very ruled by conviction. I can't support a party or a person that I don't believe in. So every decision I've ever made through my political life has been very tied to what I truly believe in. And what that does for you is, no matter what happens, you're in it because you want to be, and not necessarily because you're not being forced, you're not being induced, you're doing what you want to do. And that actually makes a difference in how you communicate whatever it is that you're doing or whatever it is that you're promoting at that point. And I understand that not everybody agrees with me. I've met quite a number of young people who don't agree with my political leanings, maybe not me as a person, but with my political leanings. And that's fine. It's a free world, it's a democracy. We're all free to choose whatever parties we want to belong to. But we have to understand that ultimately, why I joined politics is because I believed, I could do a lot more, being able to influence things from within the system. And in, advancing the interest of young people and women, we need more young people and women within the political space. And, I would like to encourage you as well, if it's something you want to do, please don't doubt yourself, no second guessing. If you believe you're fully equipped to do it, even if you don't think you're fully equipped, you will get fully equipped along the way. Just join a party. And in choosing your party, look at your local realities, the major factors to look out for in your community. And if you want to go the other route, which is, to build something from scratch, go for it. If you're, as long as you're convinced that you can do it. So please, whatever it is that you put your heart to, just pray a lot, seek God's guidance, and go for it completely. And I wish you guys all the best.
Thank you so very much, ma'am. First, I'd like to say a big thank you to you for always coming on board, and so particularly for this session and how you dug deep into your journey, and I'm sure it has inspired a lot of people. So for me, a moment of appreciation, which is personal first, and I'd like to jog your memory for a moment. Uh, shortly after your appointment at the SSC to the president, I had an engagement with you via Twitter, and the conversation snowballed into me sending my CV to you. You took your time and you pointed out a lot of things in that CV that I should improve
I think I
upon.
remember.
And
You're the one from Ogun State.
yes.
I remember. How have you been? So good to see you here.
Yes. So I was in the last cohort actually. So now I'm a moderator at the college.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So I read it and I sent feedback. But I understood that you can't possibly read all the messages, but I just want to say thank you. I mean, this is the opportunity that I've got to say that to you. Yeah.
Happy to do.
And yeah, and up and doing. And I want to say we want to, and I also pray that God continue to guide you because you have got a lot, on yourself. I noticed yourself and the SSA to the President on Youth Initiative that Mrs. Titi Lokpek as well. You sort of work closely, and I see a lot of stuff the both of you and others like you put up, particularly via Twitter. And I want to say well done, and I pray God guide you all. This is us saying thank you again for today's session. I want everyone on the call to also say thank you with the chat box, with your the emoticons. Anyone, thank you to our facilitator again for today. Thank you so much. And
thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much,
very
ma'am.
much.
So much, ma'am.
Very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much,
Thank
ma'am.
you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. So I want to also remind us to always tell our colleagues when there are classes. Honestly, these are sessions we should not miss for anything. I don't know if there is an announcement. Child, is there any announcement, particularly?
Okay, you're muted, Tahib.
Oh yeah, I don't know how I got muted. So I was saying, is there any announcement from your end?
Okay, no, none for now. Classes continue tomorrow.
All right, that's fine. So everyone, classes continue tomorrow. Let's do well to show up on time and do the needful as well. I want to say, do have yourself a lovely weekend. It's still the weekend, and do have yourself a lovely weekend ahead. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you, and bye for now.